Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wakodahatchee. This is an exciting day because the South Florida Water Management District is releasing its South Florida Wading Bird Report for the public. What is this thing? This is where we count birds in the Everglades to make sure that we know the populations, whether they're thriving or not. And the good news is last year they thrived. We saw a record-setting count of wading birds in the Everglades since we've been counting. About 2.5 decades we've been counting wading birds. So that's the headline. I'm going to ask these experts on birds to talk about what they saw, and I'm going to start with Julie Wraithmel from the Audubon Society. Thank you, Julie, for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Drew. I'm Julie Wraithmel. I'm the Executive Director of Audubon, Florida. We are so excited to be here today celebrating the release of the South Florida Water Management District's Wading Bird Report for 2018. As Drew mentioned, last year was an extraordinary year for the wading birds of the Everglades. As you may know, prior to the ditching and draining of South Florida, the Everglades were home to super colonies of wading birds. Historical reports talk about clouds of egrets and herons moving through the Everglades and raising their young there. Since the drainage of the Everglades, those numbers have declined, and oftentimes there's simply not enough water in the central and southern Everglades to see those same phenomena happening. Last year was literally the perfect storm. We had a really wet fall. We had a hurricane that came through, and as a result, there was enough water in the central and southern Everglades to mean that we saw the return of those near mythical super colonies. This is extraordinarily good news because it reaffirms what we've long suspected, which is if we can get the water right, if we can get the right amount of water in the right place at the right time, the birds will do the rest of the work for us. And so it's a tremendous opportunity for us, especially at this point in time when we're seeing historic commitments of appropriations from the Florida legislature with leadership by Governor DeSantis. We're seeing commitments from the White House asking for additional funding from the federal government to advance and accelerate Everglades restoration. Now is the time, and this is showing us what our target needs to be for how we need to get the water in order to help the birds respond. Audubon, of course, was responsible for the results that are reported in this for Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, as well as much of Florida Bay, but we were only some of the investigators that were involved in this. And I just want to especially thank Mark Cook with the Water Management District and all of your staff, Drew, for coordinating this remarkable effort. The Everglades is a large system that runs all the way from Orlando to the Keys, and it takes a strong partnership like this to really understand how things are working in this important system. So thanks again.
Thank you, Julie. We also have Tom Reinhardt from Fish and Wildlife. Thank you, Tom, for coming to this event.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Drew. I'm Tom Reinhardt. I'm the Regional Director for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And I'm really honored to be here to represent FWC in this announcement that the Water Management District is putting out. We look forward to this report every year, and this is just going to be a great year to hear what Mark has to say. The mission of the FWC is to manage Florida's fish and wildlife resources for their long-term well-being and for the benefit of people. And that's a huge job, and we can't do it alone. So we value our partnerships at the local, state, and federal level, and here particularly with the South Florida Water Management District. We work very closely with them on restoration efforts throughout the South Florida Water Management District system, largely the Everglades ecosystem. We manage the Everglades and Francis S. Taylor Wildlife Management Area, where a lot of the effort was to review the wading bird success. And this really is a conservation success story and a great example of what we can accomplish together as partners. It shows the clear importance of tree islands in the Everglades and getting the water right, water levels, water quality, getting all those components together can create a situation where you have this great success. FWC biologists maintain and restore tree islands by doing exotic removals, prescribed burning, and a variety of other management tactics to improve those habitats that allow this kind of success to really happen. So I just want to emphasize that we truly value these partnerships. We'll continue to work with the district to improve water quality, water management, habitat within the area. And I want to echo Julie and thank her for her support, and echo her thanking the governor and the legislature for their strong commitment to the Everglades in particular, but to environmental issues around the state. It's so refreshing to see that, and we really are so appreciative of that support, and it's going to help us get a lot of great things done. So thank you, Drew. I appreciate that, and thank you, Mark, for doing all the hard work. So
That's right. Now let's hear from Mark Cook, who deserves the credit for making this thing happen. Come on, Mark.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Tom and Julie. Thank you for all the kind words you said there. And thank you all, folks, for coming along today to hear about this wading bird report and the amazing year that we had in 2018. I'll just emphasize again, this is a multi-agency report. I get all the credit for editing this report and putting it all together, but there's a lot of folks out there, Audubon, Fish and Wildlife Commission, various universities, University of Florida, Florida Atlantic University, Department of Environmental Protection, Everglades National Park, a whole host of different agencies that are involved. And so it really shows how great it is that we can collaborate in such an effective way to get all these numbers together and really get a system-wide perspective of wading birds in South Florida. So, as Drew was mentioning about this wading bird report, it's a multi-agency wading bird report. What we're talking about today is the nesting season for 2018. So that's last year's nesting season. It takes a long time to get all these data together, all these counts together, and get this report put together. Now, in terms of the numbers, it was quite incredible. So for South Florida as a whole, we counted or estimated almost 140,000 wading bird nests. So by wading birds, we mean the storks, the herons, the egrets, and the ibises. And 122,000 of those nests were from the Everglades alone, 122,000 nests, which is, we have never seen anything like that in the last 80 years. It is about 3.5 times the average of what we usually see in the Everglades, so an enormous number of wading birds' nests. And to see some of those colonies out there was a sight to behold. So, as a wading bird ecologist who's been working in the Everglades for the last 16 years, trying to understand these birds and trying to protect these birds and trying to understand them in terms of how we restore them with respect to Everglades restoration, this was very exciting to me to see all this and to put all this report together. So what was really important about this, so we had 122,000 birds in the Everglades. And it's birds like this that you can see here, wood storks, all of them did really well. Some of them did extremely well, such as wood storks that you can see here sitting on their nest, great egrets here that were also sitting on their nest. White ibis did extremely well. The white ibis, we had over 95,000 nests for that one species alone. So just absolutely incredible. And this, so why is this important? Why do we care about all this? Well, this is great news for all of us. It's not great news just for the bird lovers and for the birds themselves, but it's important for all the people in South Florida, all the people that live here, all the people that visit. And it's important because, first of all, it highlights the resiliency of the Everglades. It highlights the resiliency of these birds. It shows, as Julie mentioned, if we get the water right, that means the right amount in the right place at the right time, we can recover these birds pretty quickly. Now, another point is that these birds are almost perfect indicator species of the health of the Everglades. If the birds come back, if we get the water right and we get the birds back again, that's indicative of the overall health of the Everglades. And why is that important? Well, the health of the Everglades has many societal values, which I can talk a bit about later if anyone has any questions. But getting the water right is absolutely key for these birds and the overall health of the Everglades. So why did we have this wonderful year of wading birds? Why did we have this amazing event? Well, for the most part, it was due to a series of unprecedented but fortuitous climatic events. First of all, back in 2017, we had one of the wettest wet seasons on record due to various tropical events like Hurricane Irma and 2 tropical storms. That made huge areas, the Everglades landscape, extremely wet, and that is really key to these birds because the main factor limiting wading birds is their food supply. That's the bottleneck that prevents these birds from nesting. And so with a very wet Everglades that covered the entire landscape, that's great for producing all the fish and crayfish that these birds needed. And in the Everglades is typically just a little bit too dry to produce all these fish. So in 2017, very wet, it was great for all these producing lots of fish. Then after that very wet season, we had the opposite. We had a very dry season. Now that's important because during the wet season, the water levels are too high and the birds can't get access to these fish. The water levels here are pretty high, right? But we don't see any birds in them. That's because they are actually quite limited. These birds are actually pretty bad at catching fish, and they need quite shallow water with very high densities of fish to be able to forage effectively. Now what happens in the dry season is water levels come down, all those fish and crayfish become concentrated in small pools, and that's essential for these birds to be able to eat them. So we had this, like Julie said, this perfect storm of conditions that produced, this amazing buffet of food for these birds. And the birds responded by breeding. They bred in these huge numbers, but it wasn't just the numbers of birds that was important. We had extremely good nesting success. Literally tens of thousands of young chicks were produced that fledged, and they are going to be able to provide the birds for the populations that are going to be breeding in future years. So, even though these fantastic years don't occur very frequently, these birds are quite long-lived. So when we have a really great year, like we did in 2018, that's really essential for boosting the population of some of these species. Also, because the conditions were right for these birds early in the season, which doesn't happen very often, the wood-storks started nesting very early this year. Now, historically, they nested in November, December time. Now, that's important because these birds, and here we have wood-storks sitting on chicks now, these birds have a very long incubation period, a nesting period. It takes about 4 months to get these birds from the egg stage to fledging the chicks. Now the problem is, if they leave it too late, typically these birds are nesting now in February, March, April. And if they nest during this time, they've got a 4-month period to raise their chicks. And by the time they get their chicks off the nest, the summer rains have arrived, water levels have risen again, and the prey are spread across the marsh again. They lose those nice concentrations of prey that they need to be able to feed them. And so quite often what we see, and this is the sad part of the story, is that these birds typically fail because they're nesting too late. But in 2018, these birds nested in December. So it gave them plenty of time. Not only did they nest in December, there was about 4,000 birds wood-storks that nested in the Everglades. So 4,000 nests of these threatened wood-storks nested early, produced all these chicks, and added to the population. So that was a really great success story for this year. What probably interests me the most, though, is the birds also nested back again in their traditional nesting areas in Everglades National Park along the coastal fringes. A major goal is to get these birds nesting again, not necessarily in the water conservation areas where they're nesting now, but back in these coastal marshes where they nested historically. Because that's indicative of having enough water, fresh water, down in these coastal systems, which indicates it's great conditions for Florida Bay as well as for the birds as well. So, there's a whole host of good news stories that came out of this. It wasn't just the number of nests. Now, it wasn't just the climatic conditions. Actually, water management did actually play an important role last year. So if you notice, where are these birds nesting? They're nesting on islands surrounded by water. And that's important because they are very prone to predation by critters like raccoons and other mammalian predators, opossums and the like. And if those possums and raccoons get onto the island, that can cause mass abandonment. Now, in an area called Water Conservation Area 3A, just north of Alligator Alley, we had what's called a super colony, this large tree island that supported an incredible 60,000 nests. That's more nests on one island than we usually see in the entire Everglades in a given year. So it was just an incredible sight to see. But this area is prone to drying, right? This area doesn't normally receive enough water to support that many nests. And we quite often get raccoons and other predators coming into these islands and causing a lot of abandonment. But in 2018, water managers actually were proactive, and we were able to manage to divert enough water to keep this huge colony healthy and hydrated, and therefore we prevent. If we had lost, if predators had got onto that island because it dried down, we could have lost half the nests in the Everglades. So I think that was a really great news story in terms of how water management can really help the environment and these birds in particular. So I think just to finish this off, to me, 2018 was really like a natural experiment. In 2018, we had, this unprecedented climatic conditions, but it showed, for the first time in 80 years, our scientists have never really seen the hydrologic conditions that we saw in 2018 before. And what this really showed is that it showed that if we get the water right, Everglades restoration can work. Before 2018, we didn't know whether adding water would actually benefit these birds or not. I mean, all the science predicted that it would, but 2018 showed that this can really happen. So with that, as restoration moves forward and we get more and more water flowing south, as a scientist, I think this is very encouraging news. And it's likely that if we can replicate 2018 with restoration, we can get these birds back again, and there's optimism for restoring the Everglades. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you to Wakodahatchee Wetlands and Palm Beach County for supporting us here today. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to take them. Yeah.
Are there any ripple effects through the rest of the Everglades to have this kind of wading bird success? Does this affect other species, either positively or negatively?
Very likely, yes. We're working on some of those interactions now. I can say briefly, based on studies that have been conducted by, studies that have been conducted by University of Florida have shown that alligators rely very heavily on wading bird chicks during the dry season, far more than was ever expected. And if you want to check up that in more details, it's Professor Peter Fredericks from the University of Florida. But basically what that means is when you have, so for instance, we would fly out to some of the colonies in Everglades National Park, and we're doing a study there. To get to the colony, we had to cross a pond like this that had over 100 alligators in it. And usually those colonies only have maybe a couple of hundred nests. This year they had 20 to 30,000, in 2018, they had 20 to 30,000 nests. So imagine the benefit that has on the alligator population Now, alligators, why is that important? Great, that's great for the alligators. But alligators are a keystone species. So when you add the fact that alligators are creating habitat for many other species, this has this whole knock-on effect. So the birds providing food for the alligators, which are then creating habitat for a whole host of other species. Now also, and this is where it gets a bit sort of nasty and smelly, but a lot of the work we're doing now is on the nutrient dynamics of these birds. These birds deposit a whole lot of guano. A 60,000 nest colony. Imagine the amount of poop that entails. And the Everglades is a low nutrient system. So, we're a bit worried about nutrients going into the Everglades, but this is natural recycling of nutrients within the Everglades, taking nutrients from the system and putting it onto a tree island. This enables the tree islands to grow healthy. This enables the fish and the crayfish that are surrounding these areas to grow healthy. And if we expand that to the coastal colonies, we might even have an effect of increased mangrove growth, which can help prevent, mitigate against sea level rise and factors like this. I mean, this is all some of the research that we're conducting right now. But yeah, birds themselves can have huge impacts on the system. Yes?
Many times when I come during the nesting season, you see huge iguanas side by side, the nests and the eggs, and do they eat them? Are they a threat to them?
Not really. I mean, the iguanas will eat some eggs, and they can be an issue, but not particularly. But you do bring up a good point, and that's the exotic species. There are other exotic species that are far more prevalent and have negative effects on the native species of the Everglades, including the wading birds. And obviously, the obvious one is the Burmese python. And working last year in these colonies, we frequently saw Burmese pythons, big ones, very big ones too. And I've even got a photograph of one eating a white ibis chick. So we don't know what their effects are going to be. My feeling is that they may not be as bad as raccoons, for instance, because raccoons cause mass abandonment by scaring the adult birds, and they just leave and abandon their chicks. Whereas the pythons are stealthy, and I've seen them sitting in a nest right next to a woodstock nest, right next door to a woodstock nest, and the birds aren't spooked by them so much. But if we have enough pythons and they're eating enough of these birds, then it could be an issue. Yes?
How much of the success is basically an accident of meteorology versus an effect of human conservation?
It was primarily due to this series of fortunate climatic events. We had unprecedented amounts of water that just covered huge areas of wetland, and it dried down just at the right time and in the right places to produce the perfect conditions. But that's what it did exactly what we're aiming for with Everglades restoration. So the key thing here is it basically proved that our science is right. The science that is behind Everglades restoration and the predictions that we make about Everglades restoration is right. And that's what I was talking about, this natural experiment that it provided the conditions that we hope to replicate.
How long will it be before Everglades restoration itself provides these conditions?
Well, that's the question that's not a question yeah, you can get that.
Good question. So right now we are laser focused on the Central Everglades project, which is that project that will help us get the water levels right in the water conservation areas and in Everglades National Park. Right now we're moving dirt on Tamiami Trail so we can move water more easily into Everglades National Park, and we're laser focused on building the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir so that we can store water up there and meter it in so we can get the water levels that Mr. Cook is looking for and the wading birds are looking for. So we are looking at starting construction of those projects this year.
Okay, as you know, the whole Everglades restoration is way delayed, way over budget. How soon realistically could we actually expect more water of the kind that we saw last year to be in the Everglades? 10 years, 20 years, 5 years?
So that within our lifetime. Okay, so right now we are looking at building the stormwater treatment area for the Everglades Agricultural Area project within 4 years, and working with the Corps so they can expedite and get funding for building the reservoir, within less than 10 years. So while we're building places to put water, we're also looking at building more conveyance so we can get it into Everglades National Park. So we're focused on changing Tamiami Trail so that water can move there right now.
Not,
You want to go back to Mark Cook? He's much better to listen to.
it's a local question.
Uh-huh.
Not too far from here is the Green Cave Wetlands. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Oh.
Are you, Tom?
You're not.
And that seems to be designed very differently. Is its purpose intended different?
No, it's the exact same. Just like Wakodahatchee, it's intended to treat post wastewater. And so the idea is that if we take water that still has nutrients in it and flow it through a created wetland, the plants will take up the nutrients before the water is discharged to a natural water body, and that helps to prevent things like algal blooms. The really exciting thing about what Palm Beach County has done both here and at Green Cay is that they recognized what a remarkable attractant it was for the birds and what a tremendous amenity it was for their residents and tourists alike. And so by building these facilities, this has become, frankly, a world-renowned destination for both bird watchers and photographers. And it's great for the birds, it's great for people, and it's great for the economy.
Yeah, we bring a lot of visitors who come from north to here. I got a quick question. Why is the density of birds higher here compared to Green Cay?
I can answer that.
I'll dish that off to Mark.
And also, they haven't created these little islands. They've left it open and big body of
You
water.
just answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason they're nesting here is, like I said, we have islands surrounded by water. They don't mind people being here. They get used to the people. But as long as they have that water, and this is where alligators play a role as well. You'll see there's some big alligators here, and they're doing a job. They're the guard dogs for these tree islands. They prevent the raccoons swimming across, and and their payment is when some of these chicks fall in the water. That's
They
food
have
for
left
them.
that Green Cave Wetlands intentionally open and
Yeah, I think it's a different kind of habitat. I don't think they planned necessarily to attract wading birds here. It's that was just the
This is more mature than Green Cay.
right.
too.
Yeah, it's older, so
so these
yeah.
islands are all